We're getting together today to show how I would interpret a Frazetta, which is almost always painted in oil paint. And in this case, I'm going to be um, doing a version of it. I'm going to try to do a version of it in watercolor. I've been obsessed with watercolor for a long time. It is the most difficult medium to use, and that's why I thought I would try to tackle this in front of you guys. While you watch, I blocked the main image in here from this famous painting, something to do with Atlantis, I think. It may be just called Atlantis. So I'm going to take this image, and then I'm going to take this image that I've drawn and do it in watercolor and see if I can make it look reasonably good. The one thing I prepared extra for this demonstration is there's a little creature up here that looks like some kind of a winged reptile. So what I do is I go downstairs, I grab all the reference that I have for these animals, and I've got a couple good ones in here, and I'm smart enough to make it so that I get the flip side too. So I'm just going to use that as a reference to block in this this goofy little guy's head here, because I don't really understand what he's got going on here, but I think that's what I want to do with it is look at this reference here. Lizards are very specific, so I want to make sure that I don't just do something that hadn't looked researched. So whether it is a winged lizard or not, it's going to be one here. And there's other examples of these creatures scattered around. This one is a good view, more or less. They have a ridge up there, their eye ridge. And this guy right here is kind of in perspective. It's their muzzles that I have a hard time with. There. So I think we're going to do something that kind of makes up the bulk of their bodies here. I'll be doing some talking while I'm doing this, and other times I'm just gonna paint. But this reference really helps. And I can see the way their arms are connected now too, so that's a big deal. I've got my watercolor setup ready to go. It's all cleaned off, awaiting new colors. I have drawn these things before, because when you're drawing comic books, something like this is always going to come up. Hands are remarkably people-like. I'll keep the wings. And I'm just going to erase a little bit here. Okay, so he's kind of like a frog thing going on there. But he's also very silhouetted. So I want to make sure I keep that silhouette part of it. Oh, these guys have these really long stretched toes here. So I'm going to try to keep that in there too. Some of what I might make up just because I think it just looks better if I stray from the reference here and do what I think this looks good. So bear with me while I so they have a wrist, they have fingers, they have some manner of thumb going on here, and I think that'll work right there. All right, I'm gonna soften him down a little bit right here, okay? So he doesn't stick out too much when I apply the watercolor, because he is a silhouette after all. Well, you can see with this tight shot here that I've got just what I need. I don't go overboard with really tight drawings anymore. I just feel, I just kind of have a sense of being repelled from doing that. Kind of like a you know how to do this and just do it without a tightrope. So I kind of like that without a tightrope thing going on there too. So here's where I'm going to start. We've got some good Fabriano paper hot press here, 300 pound. I'm going to veer a little bit away from what Frazetta is doing here. He's got this armor virtually built into his skin. I'm going to have it flare out a little bit, so it shows some dimension. Anyone who's ever tried to copy Frazetta, I think that's really the only way you can tell how amazing this guy is. Now, I don't have to be starting with darks. You can start, you know, so many people, based on the way they are, they started different places. There's just so many, there's just so much black in here for the shadow side. It just seems like an obvious thing for me to try it this way. So I'll just keep going this way, and we'll see how it turns out. He's got he knows anatomy very well. This is how the muscle inserts into the trochanter here. So yeah, he does know. He knows his anatomy very well. Anyone who studied it knows that he does know it very well. He's got a great rhythm thing going on here. And you can see I'm using one of these Chinese brushes right here. This is a liner brush, so-called. That means they're long and thin. And I just happened to grab it because it's one of the things I bought from the place that I shop at. And I've actually kind of taken to these things. If you look at this thing carefully, one of the things you really need to look at is that this is basically just a silhouette. It's got a few telling highlights to give it recognition of where the form is. I'm not going to get I don't want any kind of an outline approach here. So this is strictly a tonal thing. And I already see something I can do here that's going to be different. Just because, you know, my brain just wants to take over in certain places and just do fill in the area that I know is going to look good, but isn't an exact copy at all. Maybe that's another reason why we do these things. You learn on your own, this by perpetual assimilation practice, whatever you want to call it. What you can get out of this here. So I'm just flooding this area in with some brown paint. I suppose if we want to be neat, we'll go like that. But what I wanted to show you here is going from a really dark area like he's got up here, like Frank's got, to kind of a middle tone area down here, because it's not important. So I'm just going to kind of let that kind of fade. And that should mix together in a fairly uniform way. And if I want to just help it along a little bit, you know, I'll do something like that. And why do I have a weird sense of putting orange in there? Let's go even farther here. I don't know where this orange wants to come in, but it does. So it's definitely going to have some color as it moves up. See what I mean, guys? It's got color, and it's got. I think what I'm doing here is I'm trying to make an emphasis thing that the dark up here is more of the unit, and this is just kind of like a fun little color swatch down there to keep it interesting. Now from here I can go anywhere I want, and I think that's kind of important to know sometimes. With all the practice you deal with this stuff, what you eventually want to arrive at is you kind of get a sense of knowing where you're going to go without being a straight copyist from the source work. In this case, the Frazetta stuff. I ignore the lights. There's no way I'm going to be one of these guys that goes around the lights. So I have to figure out, there's other ways you can do it. Basically, it's lifting techniques. So I'm just going to go in there and kind of flood the area in with a light wash. We call these washes here. And it's going to blend with some of the other paint that's on there. And this is actually going to set me up for the eventual finish. And you'll see how I do that.
All right, we have a question in. Someone said, "Hey Steve, I've always thought that Frank's most overlooked and unappreciated / understudied approaches was his watercolors. What do you think, Maestro? Many blessings, Randy from Texas."
Randy from Texas, the great state of Texas. Say hi to Ted Cruz for me. The question was, you think some of his best work was in watercolor? Well,
some of his most overlooked and unappreciated / understudied.
Yeah, I think the underlying reason for that is the I don't know what the word is. It's kind of like a bias against watercolor versus oil. People that work in watercolor are considered lesser by the high-nosed art critics, and that's how you know. That's your first clue to know that it's nonsense. Every medium is as legitimate as any other, and that's the real way to look at it. That's not what they're going to tell you, because most of the art snobs in the world aren't even painters. They're just critics. And, as in, we criticize things that we can't do ourselves. If they can do it themselves, they've probably got a small merit badge up from there, but not much. I think people that criticize art have to be artists themselves, and that's not going to stop people from being critics. Nothing's ever going to stop that. But my hope is that there'll eventually come a time when you learn how to completely ignore things that you don't subscribe to just because it came out of another person's mouth. I mean, it comes down to one thing. It's your life, it's your art, it's your preferences, and that's what you need to be doing. I've always stayed away from arguments because they're utterly useless. They get you nowhere. And I think that's the kind of thing that really stupid people like to engage in to keep themselves from working. I have examples I could talk about. Maybe I'll do that later on. But you can see the versatility of this Chinese brush right here. Now, it's I do this to get the point back. These are fairly new brushes right here that I got from White Heron, I think it is. Anyway, he's a Chinese guy, and he specializes in all these kind of brushes here. So I'm not really one to go around things. What I normally end up doing is lifting things. I'm thinking like an opaque painter here, but the whole idea of going around stuff is just another added nuisance to the already difficult work that I'm trying to do here in the first place. So instead of, if I don't go around like a lot of guys do, or use friskets of some kind, you have to find another way to do it. And that's one of the reasons I'm going light here.
Okay, we got another question in. Someone said, what are the keys to color harmony in a piece? Does Steve usually follow a method, or does he experiment a lot? How often does the experimenting succeed as opposed to failing?
My failure rate is pretty high, according to me, and that's why you have these things called sketchbooks, where you're supposed to be free to make mistakes. I normally make when I'm trying something new, like I was working with Dr. Martin Dyes the other day. I had no idea these things went on so dark. So what do? I have to compensate, put a lot of drops of water in there. But still, you know, these things are things that just kind of come about from just the working with it, you know, and working with it is just common sense. I mean, if something's hard, how do you make it less hard? Well, you can either do it in your head or you can do it on paper. I do it both in my head and on paper. And that's the only way I've ever been able to figure this stuff out. I think I'm going to finish the bottom thing here. And I have a pretty good idea on how to do that. There's going to be a lot of black in this one. Very light washes. And that's going to blend in with that drop down there. But yeah, a lot of versatility with this Chinese brush. I used to dismiss these things and think, well, they have no spring to them. Well, I saw some other people using it on YouTube, and I thought, it's time to try this stuff. And again, my sensibilities are taking me away from a direct Frazetta copy because um, I think if I follow the things within me that are telling me where to go, I'm gonna produce a much more satisfying result than just looking at everything he does, and that's just not fun for me. Watercolor, if it is done well, according to your taste, is the beauty of it is, and the reason we keep on trying it even when we fail so many times is to see a beautiful watercolor wash is there's nothing quite like it. A little wonky in there in that because I'm trying to do it in a certain way. Yeah, super. Was there questions? Okay.
Someone just had a comment. They said, "You're a legend, Steve. You create in many medias." Mediums. And we have a question here that says, "Have you ever seen the comic strip Connie by Frank Goodwin? When Connie has her sci-fi chapter, it's like a strip done by Charles Dana Gibson and Alex Raymond."
Um, who wrote that question?
Someone named Doc Sybil.
I don't know Doc, but I am familiar with Connie, and I'm familiar with her because of my friend Steve Ringenberg, who brought over these vintage editions of Connie, and I was stunned by it. I took to it right away. I think Connie is his best work. I think um, the um, the strip that came after that, I think it's the Rusty Riley strip was overworked. I don't think it needed to be that dense with hatching. But Connie was so loose and so perfect. I just adored it. So if you're wondering who this is, we're it's the internet season, people. We can do anything we want and find anything we want. So look it up by Frank Godwin. Okay, everything's going okay. Um, a lot of times, what I do first and didn't do this time because I just didn't feel like it. I just felt like diving into the figure. Is to wash the background in first, and I'll get around to that. That is a thing where you need to go around stuff, and you've really got to train yourself to endure that because it's not the way opaque painters work at all. So here comes Lizard. There's his pouch thing. There's his goofy looking tongue. There's this. You can see that the water is very wet. And it's just a pure silhouette. We need to get a really sharp this brush has a hard time getting really sharp details. That's because it doesn't come to a really super good point. But so we use different brushes for that do have that. Pretty simple. I'm going to make this one go back in space more, this wing. And this one's going to be the darkest one right here. Well, you know what? I think I'm going to do some kind of a bad thing here. So when people copy stuff, they're really just they're copying something because they like the artist. It's a lot of fun, and when you get enough mileage in your pencil and brush, there's going to be things that take place that are going to be all your own, and that's going to make it just all the more satisfying. Bigness, what are you doing down there?
Okay, someone said, Steve, I know you have a love for mixed media, from pencils to oils and everything in between. But I was wondering, do you ever sculpt the human form for some reason? Or for some reason, I think you'd be really good at it.
I've never had an inclination to sculpt. You know, we did it back in art school because it's part of the curriculum, and so we've all tried it, but I never really took to it to the point where I would want to do it. And I never have to rely on the action figures, or I do have some dinosaurs over there, plastic dinosaurs. They would come in handy, but I'm so used to working from a picture or a group of pictures from different angles, and just learning how to figure out their form and the round from that. That's what I'm used to doing. So no, I really don't have a need to want to do that.
Someone said, I've never heard you name Neil Adams as an influence. Is he too photo-referenced for your taste, or did he just come out to the scene after your formative years?
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm happy to talk about Neil Adams. The first experience I had with Neil Adams is when Nexus Black and White #3 came out from Capitol. I flew up to New York in my early 20s, and I was determined to go around to all the main usual places to get feedback. And so I went to Marvel, and I went to DC, and I went to Heavy Metal. My last stop was at Continuity Studios, where Neil Adams' outfit was. And Neil has been nothing but kind to me. He sat down. Apparently, he saw something in what I'd done and said, well, this looks a little confused here. Like you don't really quite know how to grab onto it yet. I remember him saying that. And he just gave me a really nice, thorough look over, taking just the right amount of time with me and giving me a lot of time to have me take the things home from what he said and think about it. And every time I've talked to him since, he's been the same way. He's just been incredibly generous. I've never had a bad moment with him. I know some people have. I have not. He always spoke very highly of me. But his artwork was never an influence. It was just completely opposed to the way I draw. So I was never someone that would list him as an influence. And I think people might be able to see that when they look at what I do.
one comment here says, I believe Frazetta was to illustration, comics, and fine art what Bruce Lee was to martial arts. Just all around the greatest, period.
Well, that's a good one. Frazetta, comparing Frazetta with Bruce Lee, the end product was the same, genius. But Bruce was somebody that worked at it fanatically 7 days a week. His training programs were something that would probably put him in the fanatic category. Frazetta wanted to play baseball and mow the lawn, so there's a huge difference, and that kind of spells out the difference between their individual sense of work ethic or wanting to get better. Frazetta, it came very naturally to Frazetta, and he produced incredible works, just the very best. But his work ethic was slow, lazy, and leisurely. That was the opposite of Bruce Lee, who was at it all the time. So big difference.
Someone asked, so with Steve being a traditional artist, how does he go about getting the final images converted to a digital medium for publication, specifically with larger pieces? Does he photograph them? And we usually scan the pieces.
Yeah, little Jessica can answer that for you. We scan them, just like everyone else does. These little things that are coming up in here are called blooms or backwashes. I think the best way to deal with that kind of stuff is to just try it a different way here, and then it'll flow in a different direction. Just to reactivate the paint. Because in this case, the water hit down there and it had nowhere to go, so it back up into the thing. So let's put a little bit of yellow in there.
I might butcher his name, but someone said, have you ever met Joe Sinnott?
Oh, Sinnott. Joe Sinnott, yeah. I did meet him. Yeah, I met him near the twilight years of his life. And as anyone can tell from just looking at him, he's a gentleman. And I've encountered more gentlemen from that period than I have probably with any modern person I've ever met. I don't meet many gentlemen nowadays. But back then, for guys that were born in the 30s and the 40s, they had a different code of behavior that is in no way intact with the way people act today. So I have the highest regard for those people that came from that generation. I think they're just the best.
Someone said, there are several comic book artists and writers in the Phoenix/Mesa area. Do you ever interact with them?
I know that there are people out there. I can't say I necessarily know who they are, but they sure never contacted me. So I guess that shows you how much they want to come over here and hang out. So no, not really. I'm easily accessible through the internet, and all they have to do is write me, and they don't. So that's why I don't interact with them.
Going back to the Frazetta and Bruce Lee comparison,
Mm-hmm.
someone said, I think the basketball and mowing the lawn just helped him. Gave him longevity and helped him get needed separation from the work, like a refresh on your brain to see the work fresh.
That's all true, but the people that knew Frank made a very specific point of him being a terrible procrastinator. In other words, it was just a way to delay going to the easel when he had deadlines. Which is something that probably 95% of us can understand. The idea of him having to sit down and produce it, was hard for him. He'd rather be physically active than doing what I prefer to do, which is I like sitting here. And Frazetta had that strong athletic gene that he wanted to satisfy.
Okay, going off of that, someone asked, does Steve take breaks a lot? Is he more like Bruce Lee in that respect, or more like Frazetta?
I guess the only proper answer to that is the Steve Root answer, which is when I feel fatigued in my head, whenever that happens to come up, I stop and I go sit over there in the couch, or but I'm almost always got something inspirational in my hand. I have a hard time just, I guess you would call it vegging. That doesn't suit my personality. So when I'm not working on what I'm working on, I'm looking at more inspirational works from the artists that I like. And there's tons and tons of artists that I like. So it kind of gives me a pick me up, and it gives me a re-centered sense of perspective and what I'm trying to do. Another thing I do all the time, and this is something that I've never had any reason to change in it, because it's basically foolproof in a way that there's no reason you would want to abandon it, is when you're stuck on a painting, put it 10 feet away and sit back and look at it. That's when whatever answers I'm stuck on will come to me instantly, is looking at it from a distance, and you can easily see from there things you can't see up close and how to fix things. Let's try a different brush here. I'm mixing brown with yellow, and that's going to go into this area here. This is a 3/4 inch flat. It's got all this glue around it because they don't make the ferrules things that can stick nowadays. They get really cheap and lazy about how they do this kind of stuff. The technical challenges that watercolor gives is something that I find so challenging that I don't think there's any way it can ever become something that I'll just be able to whiz through. Challenges are we all know what challenges are. Challenges are things that come hard.
Somebody said, characters being portrayed as battle damaged has been increasingly popular in commission work. What do you think about such?
Drawing characters that are battle damaged for commissions.
characters being portrayed as battle damaged has been increasingly popular in commission work.
Yeah, that's news to me. I'm one reason is that I'm completely out of touch of, I guess you'd call it the mainstream news outlets. I pay no attention to it. I'm too busy working, and prefer it that way. No, the only news I watch is actually not news at all. What I go to is YouTube after work and try to find out what's going on in the world. Often under the subject matter of the bizarre, the weird, the strange, the inexplicable. Always been fascinated by that. So whenever I see things about Bigfoot or the biggest joke right now is the UFO thing, where we've had these things floating around for the last however many thousand years, and we've got a faction of people that are said to control things beyond 20 levels above a president, and I believe they're called the Majestic 12. And these guys are the ones that kind of call the shots. And for some stupid reason, maybe for some good reasons, they withhold all this stuff. So in the meantime, they're fraternizing with all these aliens and the different species that they have. There's supposed to be like about 7 main ones. And they keep it to themselves. It's like a private boys club with aliens. But the truth will come out eventually. And once the people start getting pushy, that's when these guys break down and start to reassess what the garbage that they've tried to hide from us for all this time.
Doc Civil wrote, and he said, just to put a face to name Steve, I'm the guy who did the Nexus, or the animated Nexus fan film short.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was a very good job. I saw that. That was an example of somebody that, if I had been a guy, like say I saw a Kirby comic, and I was of the generation that had access to that equipment, I'd be doing the same thing that he does. And he did a really nice Nexus comic in Flash that I thought was very impressive. That normally leads to something because it shows me ambition. People with ambition are not satisfied to not be without ambition.
Someone said, Steve, love your Robin Hood shirt.
Yeah.
And he also asked a question, said, Steve, when did you start with watercolor?
Well, normally in school, in the time that you're going to school, you start almost at kindergarten. I started to get serious about it when I was 19. And realized that I really knew just the very tip of the iceberg as far as how this stuff works. So once I got really serious about it, which was about 15 years ago, that's when I started to bear down on trying to figure this stuff out. Inch by inch, bit by bit, foot by foot, yard by yard, kind of like Marley's chain. And I just keep at it because that's the nature of my personality. I just keep going at it. One, because it's fun. Two, because it's hard. And the idea, I guess, in my head is the more I go at it, say I'll get a new idea of how to approach it, and then I'll just go over here at the desk and try something that I thought would work in my head. And that's how these inspirations come all the time. Ideas in your head. But the more you work at it, the more you're going to think about it. The more you're going to think about it, the more ideas are going to come. let's see how this can work out here. This right here needs to be a bluish color. And if I use transparent colors, it's probably not going to work. So I'm going to mix a little bit of white into this mixture, so I'll have something of an opaque thing that will actually properly cover something that I can't do with straight transparent stuff.
Someone said, "Cheers from Canada. I loved Nexus as a kid in the 80s. This is a real treat. So glad I found your channel. Many thanks."
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad to hear that. We're making the paint fresh and malleable. Once it starts getting that skin over it, you have to start working it over again, especially the white. And then I'll every now and then I'll do this right here just to get keep the whole thing wet. If you want to use it in an opaque way, you've got to mix this stuff up really well. That's for transparent. If you're no, that's for opaque. If you're using it transparently, all you have to do is kind of water it down. And now I've got the paint, the consistency that I want. So that's going to make a big difference. Big difference. So we got this. And it has to be just thick enough to cover what I'd put down before. So we got some interesting incline here. Down, over, down, and down. And that's how I would end up solving that problem. And since that same color is over here, Frazetta is trying to unify the colors. I'm going to bring it over here too, as long as it's on my brush. It's one of the things the school taught is put it everywhere you see it, as long as you have it on your brush. And that's what I'm doing right now. So some of this is going to be modified a little bit to give us instead of a warm kind of a color for the background, we're not going to do that.
Somebody said, Albert Vargas mixed glycerin with his watercolors to keep them wetter longer.
Yeah, that's true. Because watercolor has glycerin in it to act as a holding the paint together. Yeah, I mean, guys that really wanted soft passages would experiment with how much medium to add to get that effect. This is something all artists do. They'll try it out, and they'll kind of get it down, and then they'll realize, hey, this isn't quite how I want it to go on, and what can I do about it? And, oh, why don't I try glycerin? That kind of thing. So those things are, I think that's really great. That I think that's the way it should be.
Someone said, Steve, what are your thoughts on AI arts and where it will be in 10 years?
Oh, I don't think about it. Progress is progress. Anyone that tries to deny it or fight it. I mean, this goes on every time there's a change in the world. I think the only reason we're not using the energy from the air to power cars is because of the oil barons assassinated Tesla or something like that. The greed of corporations decide how things go or don't go. What did we do before cars? We rode horses. That was our transportation. And before that, I think you had to walk. Imagine that. But AI doesn't freak me out like it does some people. It's just the way it is. So I've got kind of a pretty solid block in here. Let's get rid of this little thing here. We're going to kind of wipe it up. A giant melmum like this entered the room there. I call her Bigness. Try to guess why.
Someone said, does Steve believe in ghosts?
Well, I can tell you that there are the things I've seen, especially from having access to the YouTube various channels, and there's at least a dozen of them by now. Yeah, absolutely. I hope I don't see one myself, but yeah, there's entities that are very scary out there, and I think to be convinced instead of just laughing it off. See, the problem with people is that until they actually experience it themselves, they tend to dismiss things. Well, that's like saying you've got an empty elevator shaft, and I don't need to step in it to know that I'm going to fall 10 stories and die. So, from what I've seen, there's just tons of anomalies out there that we never had any physical or video access to. So to me, there's no doubt there's more things on this earth than Shakespeare could ever shake a stick at.
Someone said, you're well known for not backing down from a challenge. Have you ever tried to pull a Joe Kubert/Frazetta, and rather than use all your normal tools, try and do it solely with a brush, just for fun?
Well, the brushes are how we normally use it, so that would be pretty easy based on what he just asked me. Are you talking about inking comic book stuff with a brush? Oh, there goes Bigness. Because I think that's what he's talking about.
Hi Steve, do you like painting landscapes, maybe even outside? I'd really like to hear your personal opinion on urban sketching.
Yes, I've done a lot of that throughout my life. Life painting, whether it's going outside or working with a model in a studio. These really are the things that I think will inform you about what you're doing as a fantasy artist, say. If you go down to a little brook, and and see how it works with the reeds around it and cattails and things like that, and paint it from just paint it as you look at it. You're going to absorb things that are far more going to give you the experience, the long-term experience of having done that then getting out a piece of reference that shows the same thing. It's a reality versus the shallowness of working from a one-dimensional photograph. So everyone worth anything as an artist is always going to be doing as much life painting and drawing as you can. It's a thing that goes on forever, really. It's so that's how important it is. That
someone commented, "It sounds so much like guitar. It's a lot of muscle memory and practice."
it is a lot of muscle memory. But I got to tell you, when I look at guitar players, I'm kind of blown away by it. I don't know how they do it. They know how they do it. And probably the first thing they'll tell me is, I don't know how to draw a stick figure. So it's a big mutual admiration society. So you see what I've done? That's an artistic decision right there that I think is working pretty good. A lot of this is getting into semi-opaque areas. And we'll see how that kind of works out in the end here. Basically something mixed with a little bit of white to it to give it a body color, the British call it. Needs a little bit of yellow ochre. And there's that. This thing is throwing me off. That statue is throwing me off. And I'm not going to make it that yellow color. I might, shift it towards there, like, to see what we're going to get. But I'm kind of being pushed in a more neutral direction here. And these are neutrals. They're very non-bright colors. And they absolutely have to sit back in space. And I really like, this is a Frazetta touch right here. This kind of expansive, almost like an abstract design that shows the sky. This needs more ultramarine blue in here, but we'll get it. So oil paint is an entirely different kind of experience. That's a little dark. We're going to have to lighten it up with white. But we won't do it just yet. We're going to wait until we put on the blacks that go up here. But in the meantime, I do know that if I put some white in the mixture here, it's going to give me the lighter color that I want here, especially near the bottom. So a lot of Frank, a little bit of me.
Someone says, "Steve, your face reminds me of those great Norman Rockwell paintings and drawings. It's almost as your likeness was prophetic to your art career."
Well, that's interesting. Yeah. That means I'm the guy next door, which I kind of am.
Someone said, "I'd love to see you and Alex Ross work on a collab piece. You both surely nail the Kirby/Ditko aesthetic."
Alex and I actually have jammed in several pieces when I would go over to his studio in Chicago. And that's always been a lot of fun. Alex seems to have almost a photographic memorization process, where when he looks at a photo, he can replicate it exactly. Mine isn't quite like that. It tends to sway this way and that way a little bit more. But yeah, he's got extraordinary abilities that make him very unique. And yeah, it's fun to do those kind of things with other artists sometimes. I'm going to reinforce this area right here because it needs to be lighter than it is. When you add white to paint, it makes it much darker than it should be. Like when it goes on here, it looks fine, but then it has to dry, and that's where the problems, the goofy stuff tends to come in. And that can be very frustrating. Emphasis on very. Like I have a lot of white in that mixture, but it's anything but white in the way that it is over here.
Someone said, Steve, have you ever wanted to work alongside a studio mate, or do you prefer working in solitary?
I work solitary because of my personality. Um, I'm not one of the jovial types that wants to hang out and just chatter back and forth between people. I'm much more suited to be alone, like Kirby was, and just be alone with my thoughts and have nothing to interfere with whatever I feel I might want to do at the moment. And so the only thing that would be stopping me from doing what I want to do when I'm alone is me, and that's the way I prefer it. So I try not to get in my own way.
Someone said, I've seen you've been drawing Deadpool more recently. Love to see you drawing more modern characters, per se.
Yeah, Deadpool is basically forced on me for various commissions. Um, he's certainly not on my top 10 list of characters. You know, what I really prefer is to draw um, things that are not really comic book based. I've got. I think if somebody just said, "Do what you want," I would paint a watercolor of a pretty girl on a hill with grass blowing and some nice, pretty yellow dress in her. Um, Go out and find some really good reference that I might paint on the spot about the kind of foliage that might be around her. That kind of stuff. That's where I feel an urge to be doing that a lot more these days. So that's kind of what's in my head. If I were just to do it on my own without um, having to make house payments.
Someone said, it's always fun to see your own spin on projects.
Yeah, good. I think so. I think that's part of the fun. I'm still in the blocking stage right now. Like you see all these things like that. Um, those come later, and one of the things that if a really good art school will teach you is um, is the order in which you attack these things. Basically, you're getting a very strong block in all the way around, and then from there, after you've got the big things put in, then the little things come in. And if we're able to hang in there long enough, that's what you're going to see me doing. So I've obliterated a lot of detail here just to get the large shapes in. And that's the way I've learned to think about painting. That's the way I've been trained to paint. And that's the way that's become natural for me to do it. I don't go around little things. I put the big things in first, and then we're going to see what happens here. I'm going to get into the main event here right now. I'm looking forward to that. So let's get into with that. I think all I need is the right brush to be doing this with, and that's for some reason that's been a problem the last couple. I think this one's going to work right here. Uh, Inevitably and unfortunately, I find myself this by the nature of me turning this into a opaque painting, and I'm reminded that I really don't want to be doing that. I want to keep it very transparent. So thanks for reminding me, guys.
Someone said, "Hey there, Steve Rude. I was a student of Cutter Hayes. Great to see you. Hope all is well."
Well, good. I'm glad you've been hanging with Cutter. Cutter has enough experience to go down our legs, both our arms, and up our necks. So you've got a good teacher there. So let's see how long I can keep doing the transparent stuff here. Frazetta loves to do this stuff right here, this connective tissue kind of stuff with the spear. It's pretty cool what he does. I've got a lot of black and I've got a lot of blue, and eventually there's going to be some green in there, but we'll see how it goes.
Somebody said, "Steve, when I make my millions with my comic book TV shows I'm writing and films, I'm gonna find you and we're gonna make Nexus the cartoon together and we're gonna make it completely your way."
That's a great sentiment. I appreciate that. The Nexus cartoon show, if you want to hear about that, just put a listening device in our home here and hear what I say about the people that I'm currently working with. You'll get an earful. I guess I don't have a lot of regard for them, and they know it. I think, honestly, I think there's just two ways of dealing with things in the world. One is cooperation, um, open communication, and obviously you have to be, as I call, swimming in the same stream as somebody. And I don't have that right now. And there's nothing on the horizon that will indicate that I may ever find that. But I can tell you one thing, at that animation desk over there that we're looking at, I probably spend a good 2 hours a day over there turning out new things because I'm always getting new ideas for layouts. And because I love doing it so much, seeing one more potential scene come to life. I work on it as though it will be real someday, but with no guarantee of it ever happening. So go figure that. And then explain it to me. Let's clean our palette off here. We got a lot of white in here. I don't really want to go into the white area if I don't have to. The palette that I have here is called a John Pike palette. It is far and away the best palette for water-based paint that I've ever used. The wells are just big enough. They're not too big, they're not too small. I'm sure you're thinking of Baby Bear's bed around now. And it's even got a lid that goes on top of it. to keep the paint fresh, or so it claims. And I think this is something everyone should, I know that everyone does do this at a certain point. Their palette gets to be kind of a mess. And to me, when a palette's a mess, your mind's going to be a mess, because your palette is your only real extension of from your brush to your brain to the paper. So doing this gives me a sense of cleanliness and openness, where I don't feel congested in my brain. Some people like to just keep going and keep going and keep going and drive it into the ground. They're kind of trapped in this spell about just going no matter what. I kind of don't want to do that. I think I learned my lesson that if at some point you're not smart enough to know that it's time to give it a rest, I think that can be detrimental. This is a very dark purple right here. And this is something I'm looking forward to. I don't quite know how I'm going to do it, but I will. I think this is going to be a matter of just putting lighter washes down next to darker ones. And if I'm going to be smart about this, which on occasion does happen, I'm going to get out my little piece of paper here. And try to produce the results that I want based on what I'm looking at here. So, for example, he's got this. I'm actually going to put the green over here, and one of the ways I do that is to grab a fairly stiff brush and lift the color off. And that's one of the many ways that almost all watercolorists use to get a cleaner area to put a different color on. So as you can see, I'm going to put this color in like that. Look at it to make it's going to dry a little lighter. We all know that about watercolor. And then I'm going to mix the purple in with it. And hopefully I'll get what I want that way. And the real darks, the darkest dark you can ever get, as far as an artist goes, is black. So let's put the black down here. And that is going to be lighter by comparison, because black is the absolute darkest dark we can use to simulate nature.
All right. Somebody said, would love to see a resurgence of Golden Age heroes, one not so known.
What agents?
Or resurgence?
Resurgence. I think you might have to talk to Roy Thomas about that.
A question, it says, is there still big enough market for independent comics to survive the big companies? Been thinking of doing my own book, but not sure if the market is there.
Well, this is something that involves risk. And my take on risk is fairly profound. So you have limited resources, you have limited this, limited that, but you really want to do your own comic, and you want to do it your way, and you don't want interference from people that, if they were to interfere, would just mess up your vision and your work. To me, the decision is almost always to go for it. If you don't know where to go, there are places to show you where to go. Get the cheapest arrangement you can get online about how somebody will, when you send your work in, they will turn it into a however many page comic. And at the very least, you're going to have something you did that no one else had to step in and help you with. And the way things are going in comics right now, I think that the independent wave is just going to build up to tsunami levels. I think that the disparity of people working for the big companies and their odd political persuasions of how they do things has really just been kind of a death blow to the pure entertainment value of comics. So if you knowing that you have the freedom to be able to do that, I encourage you to try it.
Someone said, "Hello, Steve. I really enjoyed Nexus Battle for Thin World 1 through 5, and I'm looking forward to seeing more. What are your plans going forward? Keep up the excellent work."
Well, thanks for the question. About a month ago, I made an announcement that there would be no more Nexus books coming out, and that was strictly because we weren't cutting it financially. We're still in that state of needing the funds to keep producing these things and paying the people that we employ, and that hasn't changed. So, really, the only way to keep Nexus alive is to fund it, and we tend to get on a 1 to 10 scale. I think we tend to be pretty low on that scale as far as what we can financially dig up from the various sources that fund us, essentially you guys. We don't make enough. So there's a very good chance there won't be any more Nexuses unless we get a more influx of the money needed to survive in the business. And I think that's something that any independent publisher can understand. So what do? You fight. You put out announcements. You do things like this. And basically a lot of awareness campaigns to remind people that if you want it, if you want to see the work come out of me, then we want to survive and keep our house, which we have. We've had so many collection agencies barking down our throats about that. And these are all things that Janelle has to feel, which is anything but fun. We've had at least 5 or 6 encounters with that. But we've never been able to crack through to the kind of funds that we really need to feel liberated from having to ask and go on to these funding outlets here to feel comfortable. So that's really what it comes down to. The more pledges we get, most pledges come in small amounts. And there are times when they come in larger amounts. We are somehow missing out on the people that can contribute large amounts. And the larger amounts are obviously more helpful to us as a surviving company than the stuff that most people can afford, which are small amounts. We appreciate everything that you send in because that's how you show that you care. But I'm also aware that there are multimillionaires out there with money to burn. They literally have so much money, they're looking for a way to get rid of some of it for tax write-offs. We have not yet found that person. If we were to find that person, I could go right back to doing the next Nexus book and the next Nexus book after that, without having to stop and worrying about the things that we have to worry about now. So if that makes any sense to you guys out there, it's basically a requirement of more money than we're getting to keep the Rude Dude offices fluent. And we're having a real hard time with that. So, know any millionaires?
Someone said, love your honesty, humor, and transparency. One of the few artists who surely aren't afraid to speak their mind.
Yeah, that one I really appreciate. So whoever said that one is that's great.
Shane Allen.
Okay, well Shane, that's exactly what I try to stand for in life. The reason I act like that is because I see so few people doing that. The basic tendency of human nature is to not rock the boat, because my conscience is so strong about things that I see that I know are wrong. To do anything less than speak up about it would be an insult to my intellect and everything I've learned in life. And besides, I know this is about corporate people and people that tend to be bullies. They like it when nobody speaks up. That keeps them nice and safe and keeps them out of controversy and keeps them enabled to do exactly what they've been doing all this time. A lot of them are cheating people without a sense of conscience. And they will just keep, that's their behavior pattern, that's their MO, and they will keep doing that until someone calls them on it. I've always felt a responsibility to be one of those people that calls them on it. And it's not just because I was a Boy Scout, because although the Boy Scout code of standing up to things that you know are wrong is the strongest a way for an American to present himself to things that are going wrong, to change them so they go back to being right. And I don't think we have to go into all the things that are going on right now where people in front of the Senate are just lying through their teeth. This is rampant behavior nowadays. And thank God we have people on one side that are calling them on it. But there's never enough. But I think just as a matter of conscience and living with yourself, doing what you know is the right thing is one of the most important things you can do and stand for in life. But thank you for that.
Someone said, Steve, I first became aware of your work back in 1981 when I was in high school in one of the fanzines of that time. And when I saw the Galassi cover, I knew I had to get it. Thanks for the memories.
Yeah, that's great. You know, I look at that letter kind of philosophically. It's kind of the essence of what the collectors of that make up fandom are all about. This guy happened to like the work of Paul Galassi. When I was in high school, Paul Galassi was my idol from Master of Kung Fu. And they have those kind of people in your life that you look forward to seeing the next contribution of work that they put out. Is one of the coolest things about being alive, is knowing that next month or The month after that, you're going to be seeing something that is going to really excite you. And that's another reason that's very important in my mind, is to never let a fan down. Letting a fan down is like hurting. It's like taking ice cream away from a kid. You know, why would you want to do something like that? So, knowing there are expectations from people that are counting on you, that's a responsibility I'm happy to bear. So that's one of the reasons the work is always number one. And regardless of what other people may think about it, if you follow what's given to you on your inside, and be learned about your craft, those are the two things that make up a good life. So again, in keeping with my thing about not going around things, I'm staying with that. So a lot of transparent colors are being flooded into these areas right here. Obviously, some colors are more opaque than others, but you know, that's part of how they're made. When you work with a watercolor, as I'm doing here, um, eventually something will come about as you work with this medium, um, that will either tell you that it's something you want to keep pursuing, or not. I pursue it because it's hard, and if I didn't love the way it looks so much, um, I would have a lot less reason to keep pushing on like this. But I just, you know, my whole identity in my life is involved in what you see me doing right here. My main thing in life is comic books, or graphic fiction, or illustrated fiction, whatever you want to call it, because most people will cite reasons about, we want to tell stories, and how good can we make the stories? How good can we make them that you can actually affect someone's life for the entirety of their life? That has immense appeal to me. So I love the challenge, the perpetual challenge of always trying to find that special spark, that ingredient. Good example is the movie Contact, which I just kind of revisited last night. Um, that is a movie so superb, that it literally never lets up from the very beginning to the last close out of the frame. That's how good that movie is. And those are the kind of things that when I see, I want to be a part of in my work, to do work that good, so that it affects others the way that movie affected me. Again, this is all transparent paint right here. The little highlights and stuff, I'm just not going to worry about that right now, because it'll just kind of derail me a little bit. I don't know quite how I'm going to pull this off, because I still think like an opaque painter, like an oil painter, or a acrylic guy, or casein, or something like that. But I'm going to see how far I can push this here.
We got a question in, and it says, Steve, is there one or two pieces of Frank's that was particularly life-changing and influential on you in your art approach?
One of them was Mammoth. The force of that was almost as though it was a 3D event. Um, Offhand, that's one that I can think of. Um, um, the funny thing is, if you were to pick something and send it to me and say, "Is this one of your favorites?" Because it happens to be one of mine, I would probably say yes. In other words, it's a very hard thing to pick out something that stands out above all others, and that's why people uh, are so big on learning from him. And how do you learn from people? What is the process you do? Well, the smartest process I know is the way I'm doing it here, and that's why I'm demoing it, um, to see what I can come up with result wise. But yeah, a bunch of good questions from you guys. And the end goal here is to eventually fuse all these different color shifts together, and you'll see that happen. One of these colors is it's got yellow, ochre, and green in it, and that's the color I'm going to be putting on now. But yeah, he really knows his anatomy. So this is where I'm scrubbing. Instead of using white paint to put it in there, I'm scrubbing to get an area so I can put a cleaner color down. So that's the only two ways that I know that you can do it.
A question we got in says, what advice would you give an artist who is stuck on an idea for a book? What do you do to achieve an idea you're stuck on to make things happen, story or layout wise?
Well, this is what I have to think about. I don't quite know an easy way to answer that, other than if it's something that's important to you and you're having trouble getting to the next step. Well, then you're in good company because everyone who's creative goes through that, especially if you're writing your own book, which I assume you are. Um, Sometimes you got to let things gestate. I mean, I get the feeling that you're not someone who's undergoing severe deadlines of any kind at all. So you've got that leisure factor. Um, Leisure, but don't be lazy. That's one way to look at it. Um, Take it very seriously because in the end, you want something you're going to be proud of. And that means working at it. But I think you're going through nothing more than what everyone goes through. If a guy's sitting there at a typewriter and he suddenly has, I don't want to see a block. I don't believe in blocks. I believe in a case of butting up against something that you don't have the next answer to. Um, well, the good news is that there is an answer, and there's a really good answer, and you can settle for an answer in the form of an okay answer, lame answer, or the best of all, the greatest of all answer, and that's just a matter of plumbing into yourself, reading as much as you can to prompt your brain into different areas of thought, and eventually, if it's on your mind enough, you'll think it up. And that's a moment worth working for.
Someone says, I was a backer to your Nexus Artist Edition into sketchbooks. I got them on time and I was very happy with my purchase, and I would be glad to continue to do so in the future.
Well, good. I think that guy that wrote in is what I would probably call, an average contributor financially, um, which is wonderful because any amount shows and helps us continue with our enterprise here. But in order to continue in a way that I think Janelle and I would much prefer is to get the kind of money that comes in that we see other people getting that we don't tend to get, and that would be literally a minimum of $100,000, and we've never gotten that. But that's what it would take, $100,000 to keep us going.
Another question we got in says, what are your thoughts on Kelsey Scheinman's art on Mike Barron's Nexus?
I don't even know the guy's name that's working on it, but from what I've seen, the art seems very good. He's very competent. He knows all the basics. The only book I've seen is the monster something or other book, Kraken, yeah, something like that, and that work was very good. Now, something I'm going to show you here is how we scrub out the highlights here. See that?
I got a comment that says, so many people follow the herd. Unfortunately, rather than standing out against the frauds and more. Love my 2 Spideys and Green Goblin pieces for me.
Well, good. I'm glad. The quality of what I do for myself or for you guys is the only thing I have to maintain my rep. You start to lower that and you start to let people down, and that's not a good thing. So no matter what it is that comes in, know that a bad job is going to ruin somebody's day, and a good job is going to make them happy for a long time.
Question we got in says, have you ever considered doing in-person teaching lessons? Sure you have been, figured I'd ask/recommend.
I have done it. I taught at a school I taught a workshop at a school a couple times. And the enrollment, for some reason, was very low. So I didn't get the amount of people that I really would have liked to have had in there to expose the way I do things to all these people that signed up. But what I do on occasion, dependent entirely on the quality of the person's work, is I will still do one of these weekend workshop excursions. And that means that somebody will come in really from any place in the world if they can afford it, get a hotel, rent a car, and then we spend Friday, Saturday, and Sunday all day going at it. And in that time, I can probably expose them to 90% of everything I know. And if you take notes and you listen very carefully, then it's a matter of going home and just working on those things that you learned during those 3 days that can carry you a long ways in your career. Because I know it's worked for me.
Someone says, hey Steve, I'm a fellow Arizonian. I've lived here my whole life. What motivated you to move to Arizona? Also, do you ever consider moving back to Madison, or do you like Arizona?
Well, I moved from Madison on the day I came out of a New Year's Eve party when I was in my early 30s. And, that was January, right? Well, it happened to be so cold during that moment, I said, I don't ever want to feel this kind of cold again. So there's your main answer right there, is to why I will never move back home to Madison. But it is my hometown, and I have a lot of great memories there. And I did a lot of growing up there, and I had a lot of fun with my friends. Friends, I wish I saw more often these days. I try to get in touch with them, but sometimes people make it more difficult than it has to be. Everything for me is simple. If I teach, it's got to be a simple way of teaching. People have to be able to understand it. Um, there's nothing complex about what I do, because complex is taking something simple and making it unnecessarily more hard to understand. And there's so many people in the world that do just that, mostly politicians and lawyers. They deliberately invented a kind of a language that nobody can really understand. They pretend to understand it, but they really don't. And they end up screwing a lot of people because of that way of talking. But it really isn't a way of talking. It's a way of confusing people. I would love to see much more of a world where this transparency thing that people brought up would be the norm. And I just like to see how it affects everything. Because if it didn't affect it for the better, I think we'd all be a little shocked. But good question. I'm getting a grip on where I have to go with this now, so I'm gonna kind of pursue that. I was getting some glare on the palette, and I don't want that. So, hello, Floey. Yes, hound dog. So, washes. I'm just gonna, now that I kind of have a good grip on what I'm going for here, I can proceed with a lot more verve, if you want to call it that. I just know where I'm going with it now.
Someone said, Steve, I just made a YouTube video about copying the masters, and I referenced your amazing master studies in my video. You're an inspiration.
That's very nice. Thanks a lot for doing that. We all need all the help we can get.
Someone else said, are you coming down for TucsonCon? If so, bring some of your HC books if you got some.
No, I don't plan on it. In fact, I'm very content these days. Just stay in the studio. I'm currently 67 years old, and I'm getting a sense more than ever of that ticking clock. And since life is time, with minutes, seconds, hours, days, years, decades, I feel an urging to stay here and produce, knowing that's going to get me the farthest in life that I've ever wanted to go. But good question, thank you. A lot of questions coming in. That's good, guys. I think you can kind of see what I'm trying to be doing here. Can you guys see that? A little bit of this, a little bit of that. now I'm at a point where I can go in there and really start to hone in on specifics. And you see all these little ins and out? I've got to deal with those too. And if we stick around long enough, um, you're certain to see how I'm going to handle that. Still working with this Chinese brush here. You know, as much joy as Frazetta got from doing this, um, it's too bad he had that itch to always be outside doing something physical. But that he wouldn't be frank if he was like that. We want him to produce new work all the time, but he wasn't set up mentally to do that kind of stuff. It was almost like a hobby to him. That made his rep. I think this is the way all these pieces start out. They start out broadly. You begin to hone in on this and that, and things become clearer at a certain point. And once you kind of get into that mode, you're kind of out of the tall weeds at that point. And life can get a little more relaxed and fun. Look at this armor, the way I'm going to be doing this right here. First of all, I've got a base color going on. And I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with this now. And it's a very simple thing. It just is lifting the paint off to get the light parts. It's either that or use white, or some people use a razor blade. I'm not really big in razor blades. So I use different things. And one of them is one of these stiff brushes right here. Winsor & Newton University Flat. I bought this ages ago. This thing must be 40 years old right now. And because it's a nice stiff bristle, we can lift and more or less erase the area that we want here. And because it's a flat, we can also get these skinny little lines like this. Personally, I feel more comfortable with opaque paint, just going in there with a white, but that has a lot of problems of its own. And the problem you find with that kind of stuff is that gouache dries so damn dark, it just kind of makes you want to pull your hair out. So it's a constant matter of testing. Is it going to come out too dark, or is it going to come out too light? This kind of gives you a graininess to the paper, which I don't like. But it does lift it off, and that's actually a very important part of working with this method right here is being able to lift the paint off. The better the paper, the easier it is to lift.
Someone said, "Is this acrylics washes?"
No, it's genuine watercolor. Here comes our highlights. These are fun to put in. Most all artists consider highlights the dessert of painting, as one of my teachers used to call it. Just enough. They're not all the same size. They're not all the same lightness. They've all got their own little characteristics to them. This is what artists call the rendering part, where you get in there with little things and work it out. And I'm still not really sure what that word means. What exactly is rendering? I think it's just going in there with smaller details. I think that's what it means.
Somebody said, "Do you consider the 1970s and 1980s as a high point in sci-fi art?"
Yeah, yeah, I do. The people that would put these shows together back in the 70s and 80s, they took it a lot more seriously. Now I think it's just kind of turned into a novelty, a sideshow thing where any kind of fan art can get in there. But when I was breaking into the field in the 80s, I was able to see some of the very best artists in the California and U.S. area. There was a guy named Glenn Orbick, who I ended up taking classes with at some point. He was so good. And it really made a huge difference in how I could improve from my art, because the school that I was at was hardcore, really hardcore. And they examined everything almost microscopically. And so when you got out of that school, I was there for a year. I took a class a week, drove in 1 hour, one way, long ways to go, and took one class a week. And from that 1 year going to that school, made a huge difference. Did I answer that super? I don't know if I answered that or not.
Yeah, sounds good. That's the point.
The only problem with this, and I don't exactly know, I think this is light Fabriano. Soil would be 140 pound, not 300. When you experiment with watercolor papers, that means you can either talk to the art store people and say, send me samples. They come in little 3x5 little flip things. Do that, and then you can experiment all you want. This paper is a little inferior in the way that it's digging up too much of the paper fibers. But these highlights are fun to put on. I just don't want to see it digging into the paper as much. So the very best paper has got this stuff called sizing on it. And sizing is just this very confusing term. That means there's a lot of glue mixed in with the paper, so that the water can't soak into it as easily as it would if it wasn't having that glue in there. Let's try to go back to my little Chinese brush here. and I'm going to dip into the different paint areas that contain the color that I know I'm going to be working with. So I've got a color like this. I've got a purple color, and I've got a really neutral color that I'm kind of putting on now. It's I can tell that it's a very much a gray, so it probably has a lot of black in it. I'm going to bet ultramarine blue and yellow ochre. That's what I'm going to bet, and maybe a little bit of black if I need it. So let's find out. It has to go on very light, so that means a lot of water. This area here is over exaggerated, so I'm going to have to erase that with my brush, and that's how you erase things. I wouldn't do it with that brush because it's not meant to erase. It's the hairs are too fine and too they're not stiff bristles. So you kind of want to. There's a brush for everything, and I don't think it would surprise you to know that it's all common sense. Frazetta loves these little patches of different colors. He just loves that, and it adds a lot of life to the painting too. If we were using oil paint here, it'd be considerably easier in a lot of ways, but there would be problems with that too. There's always a medium consideration that goes on every time you work with a particular kind of paint. At some point, I may just say chuck it and start going in with a white paint. In fact, I think I'm going to try that right now. It's just a matter of that I'm more comfortable with using a body of paint mixed with have a white mixture to it than something that's I have to go around, or just have a hard time with that working the wash part of it. So get the black in there so we know how to compare it to something. Swing that black in there, and let's go really. I'm starting to get the paint starting to. I can't think of the word for it right now. Starting to harden a little bit.
We got another question that says, did you practice the tiling method with Glenn Orbeck?
Yes, I did. That was part of the school's big thing was tiling. Tiling is nothing more than a shrewd word. I think it came from the Riley school back east of everything's a shape, and you find the right shape to describe anything of the form. So yeah, tiling is the word we used. Good point. I think the greatest, hands down, guy who uses tiles, currently is Drew Struzan, who is not in good health, but his career was second to none. Nobody could touch the guy. He was the greatest. I was a good friend of Drew, Stru as I call him, but he was the very best. In the past, the best tile guys were Leyendecker, Cornwell, Rockwell, and people from that school. Those were the best tile guys there were. You know, I'm finding myself going back to my tendency of a white mixed into the paint. So I think I'm just going to let that go. That's normally the way it goes with me. So it's not a true watercolor. It's water-based paint, of course. Um, but this has got what the British call body color. And that's nothing more than it has white in it. I've been informed by the Rude Dude staff, all 100 of them behind the camera, that we've been going at this for about 2 hours. Um, I've been doing this by request that people would like to see me, instead of going 5 minutes for what I'm trying to demonstrate, to go considerably longer than that. So I think 2 hours definitely qualifies for that. I will definitely show you this thing when it's done. I think it'll look good. I'll probably convert more to opaque paint, where I'm more comfortable working. So as far as it being a true transparent watercolor, it's not going to be that. But it will look good, I hope. And I'll show that to you when I get it done. In the meantime, couple important things really for the reason we're doing this today is there's only 4 days left to make a pledge. And we're currently at $17,000, and we're trying to go for 20K. Backers. This is very important to us to get more backers. We have almost 330 backers, and what we would like, and it's very doable, is to get to 350 backers. And so when we get those 350 backers, and that's entirely up to you and how much you want to help us, help the donations come in to keep us afloat. We have another page of original art that we'll be selling to one of the backers. You'll get first dibs on this very first page of The Coming of Gormondo, which is the last book we published with an all new Nexus material. Details are kind of fuzzy to me, kind of iffy, but the girls will be able to tell you exactly how this is going to work. But that's the page that is going to be up for grabs.
Yep. So once we hit 350 backers, then people, it'll become available to purchase on the Kickstarter.
Okay, so in other words, it's a reward for making 350 backers. Okay, and that's this is an incentive for you to maybe want to purchase this page right here, one of a kind, huge original art that I'm working on, bigger than probably anybody is working on these days. And I really enjoy working this size, let me tell you. So that'll be a wrap for today. The next time we get together, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm sure I'll be informed of what to talk about. In the meantime, if you've got suggestions of things that you might want me to tackle paint-wise or drawing-wise, this is your chance to write in and tell me what you'd like to see. And somebody's going to get lucky, and I'll look at what they're suggesting, and we'll go for it. So that'll be the next time we get together and have some fun. So that's it for now. 2 hours on, we got as far as we got.
Someone said, I enjoy longer videos like today's.
Well, I'm glad. Somebody wrote in and said, I enjoy the longer videos. So if this is what you guys prefer, that's what you're going to get. And I'm anxious to finish this up because it's been a lot of fun. And I guess all there is to say is just to say thanks again. Um, Donate what you can, um, and look for that millionaire because I sure am. You guys take care. We'll see you next time.